Revenge films.
The doctor told me that I need a miracle to get pregnant because I have a chronic illness. I've had that illness since before I got pregnant, so my husband already knows about it and he understands. Instead of complaining about it, he looked at the bright side and he told me that we should consider ourselves very lucky if we get pregnant. My husband always thinks about what's best for me, and he's a very kind-hearted man who never blamed me for our child. However, my mother-in-law was the complete opposite. She is very bad-natured, like one of the villains that you see in movies. When she learned that I was not pregnant yet, she treated me like a useless piece of junk. And whenever we met, she kept on asking me when she'd meet her grandchild, and she keeps on telling me to hurry up the process like I can control nature or something. She rambles on and on how she longs to see her grandchild and how she wants to hold the baby in her arms whenever she pays a visit to her house. But since my husband knows the situation, he stops her from annoying me. Of course, I also told my mother-in-law about my chronic illness before my husband and I got married. However, my mother-in-law denies hearing about it, saying, "I don't know." Apparently, her thinking is that everyone who gets married will naturally give birth to children. However, no matter how much we tried, I can't get pregnant, so she kept on calling me names and speaking ill of me. She even started aggressively ranting. What's worse is that my mother-in-law comes to her house almost every day. When my husband leaves for work, she checks that my husband is not at home and then marches inside our house. She calls me names like defective product and inferior merchandise. After she's satisfied disrespecting me, she then marches back to her house. During that time, I felt like I was the one wrong because I couldn't get pregnant. So I did not tell my husband about the daily struggles that I was facing. So the abusive language continued on and I remained silent about it. However, one fateful day, a miracle occurred. I finally got pregnant. Never have I ever thought that I would get pregnant because of my chronic illness. So I didn't notice that my period was late that month. But just like the stories you usually hear of how women find out they're pregnant, I felt a queasy feeling in my stomach out of the blue one morning. Thinking that there's no way this meant that I'm pregnant, I walked to the nearest pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test kit. I then went to a bathroom and it showed a positive mark. The moment my husband arrived from work that day, I told him about the test and he was overjoyed about the great news. We then headed to the hospital immediately. The gynecologist was also very shocked by the miracle. We then had a follow-up observation after that. After making sure that everything is fine, my husband and I reported our pregnancy to my parents and his parents. My parents and my father-in-law were very happy to hear the news, except for my mother-in-law who wanted a grandchild the most. She started speaking ill of me again, even though she finally got what she wanted. "The baby will probably have a pig-like nose if it takes after your features. What a pity to the baby. You are very hairy, Chloe, so I'm sure you will give birth to a child who is not a human. That baby will probably be called a piggy for a nickname." My mother-in-law started using abusive language toward me. She pressures me a lot to get pregnant, but when I finally got pregnant, she did this. What in the world does this woman want from me? Apparently, my mother-in-law wants a grandchild, but if I'm the one who gives birth to the child, a piglet will be born. She said that there's no way she'll have a grandchild who looks like a pig. Of course, my husband and my father-in-law stopped her from being disrespectful to me, but she never showed any signs of reflecting on her actions. No matter how much my mother-in-law called me names and disrespected me, I didn't really care anymore because I was too happy with my pregnancy. I completely ignored my mother-in-law and I enjoyed my miraculous pregnancy to the fullest. Even the morning sickness that I had that made me feel so unwell, I was able to tolerate it whenever I thought that the baby inside my belly was also doing its best to grow and survive. I did say that I was hopeless with getting pregnant because of my chronic illness, but the moment I got pregnant, I realized how much I was waiting to have a baby one day. Months passed and before I knew it, my belly was the size of a ball. I safely gave birth to a healthy little boy. My husband and my father-in-law melted the moment they saw the bundle of joy in my arms. I stayed at the hospital for about 5 days, and I then went home together with my husband and our newborn baby. For about a month, I took care of our baby boy while I did the chores at home. My heart was filled with joy and happiness when I watched our cute son drink breast milk. While I was relaxing at home and loving watching our son, my mother-in-law, who never showed up since I gave birth, came to our house holding a baby in her arms. I have no idea whose baby that was or where she got it from until she uttered the most shocking words I heard in my life. "I prepared a baby for you. Take that pig baby of yours to the orphanage or somewhere and raise this baby instead." What are you saying? Do you even hear yourself? Whose child is that? Where did you get that baby from? I had so many questions and I asked my mother-in-law, but it seems like she didn't hear me at all because the response she gave me was, "This is an animal with your blood running through his veins. There's no problem with leaving that baggy babe in the care of the orphanage, right?" My mother-in-law said this and that while she slowly made her way closer to me. She then placed the baby on the floor right in front of me and she moved even closer to me, telling me to hand my baby to her. I was scared as to what she was about to do to me, to my baby and me. My mother instincts kicked in, and before I knew it, I was throwing the baby toys that my son got as gifts from friends, and I also took off the handle of the baby stroller and hurled it at her. I then trampled down on the horrified look on my mother-in-law's face and hissed, "Let's find out if you will know what it feels like to be treated like a pig, if your nose turns flat like a pig's." I stomped at her face, mainly on her nose. My mother-in-law mumbled something and then grabbed my leg. I then lost my balance and toppled over. While I was trying to get up and writhing in pain, my mother-in-law called my husband to rescue her. My sense of reasoning flew out the window, and before I knew it, I was holding my baby in my arms and the baby that my mother-in-law brought. I ran as fast as I could to my friend's house, which was a 1-minute walk from my house. I then called my husband for emergency and he told me to wait where I was. I waited for a while and my husband finally arrived. When I saw my husband, I also saw my brother-in-law and his wife. They were in tears and they hugged the baby my mother-in-law brought. That's when it dawned on me. Could it be that the baby belongs to... I had no idea who that infant belonged to, but I now know that it was a child of my brother-in-law. When my brother-in-law's baby was born, I saw him behind a glass window. However, now that the baby has grown, I had no idea it was the same baby. After listening to the stories in my friend's house, I learned that my mother-in-law suddenly appeared at my brother-in-law's house that day. She asked for a cup of coffee from the wife and made her go to the kitchen. Then, while she was alone with the baby, she took that opportunity to escape with it and she ran to my house. When my brother-in-law's wife went back to the living room with a cup of coffee, there was no one in the room, so she panicked. With her baby disappearing in her mother-in-law's sight, she immediately called her husband for an emergency. My brother-in-law then contacted my husband, and since I also called my husband for emergency, that's how they found out where my mother-in-law was. After that, my husband, my brother-in-law, and his wife all headed to our house. It was pandemonium when we arrived at our house. The moment my brother-in-law's wife walked in the door, she headed straight to my mother-in-law and stared her down. That was intense. I thought she was going to actually punch her in the face. My husband was furious with what my mother-in-law said to me earlier. It was complete chaos. With all that happening, my mother-in-law growled, "I will never let myself be related to a pig. My oldest son's wife might have a beautiful face, but she's a prostitute and has a bad attitude. These are my grandchildren, so I can do whatever I want to do with them." My mother-in-law went insane. She apparently doesn't want her grandchild to look like me in the future, and my brother-in-law's wife is beautiful, but my mother-in-law doesn't want her to raise her grandchild. So my mother-in-law thought of an idea of letting me raise a better-looking child according to her. By the way, my mother-in-law calls my brother-in-law's wife a prostitute, but she isn't like that at all. She just has experience being a hostess years before. Hearing the story of the shocking thing that my mother-in-law did, my father-in-law was shocked and turned pale. He apologized profusely to my brother-in-law's wife. He then slapped my mother-in-law with all his might to make her come to her senses.
What have you done? What in the world were you thinking? How could you steal someone's child? You need to be reported to the police. And to think of sending the baby to an orphanage? Seriously? Get out of here! Hey, out of this house this instant! And never call yourself their grandmother! You have no right to call yourself that!
Why do I have to be the one to get out of here? Why am I being treated as a villain here? I was just trying to give the right baby to the right set of parents.
My mother-in-law yelled and tried to explain herself, but my husband and brother-in-law and father-in-law escorted her out of the house and they declared cutting ties with her. Then my father-in-law contacted his attorney friend so that he can start the divorce process. I heard him saying he didn't want to see my mother-in-law's face ever again. Honestly, I don't want to see my mother-in-law's face again too. That's why when I heard my father-in-law say that, I felt relieved. I mean, with what happened this time, my mother-in-law made an enemy of her whole family, and even my father-in-law, her last ray of hope, is already doing the process of the divorce. There's nothing that my mother-in-law can do to save herself anymore. My mother-in-law was raging in front of my father-in-law for a while, but he contacted his mother-in-law's parents. After a few minutes, they arrived in a car and shoved my mother-in-law inside. They then went on their way to who knows where to discipline her. After that, my father-in-law contacted my aunt and uncle and told them the details as to what happened. They were at loss for words when they heard the whole story. After that, My grandparents-in-law cooperated with the divorce, and my mother-in-law was never welcome to their house ever again. Apparently, my mother-in-law is raging at my grandparents-in-law's house, complaining that she's the victim and that it's absurd for her husband to divorce her.
You're a disgrace to the family! Don't you ever talk to your children and grandchildren again! You're the scum of the earth!
Her relatives heaped abusive words upon her. It seems like they won't let her out of the house because she might embarrass their family even more. By the way, my grandparents-in-law's house is located in the middle of nowhere, where you have to ride a car to get to the city. Both my grandparents-in-law have driver's license, but my mother-in-law doesn't have a driver's license, so I'm sure she won't be able to go to the city on her own. Even after hiring an attorney to get a divorce, if they let my mother-in-law do whatever she wants, they were worried that she might get into serious criminal trouble. That is why my grandparents-in-law said that they will never allow her to get out of the house, so that she won't do anything that might put her behind bars. Well, not being able to get out of the house might feel like being caged in a prison, but that's just a result of her actions. That is why I don't feel any pity for her at all. Indeed, I think that karma finally got to her and she got what she deserved. I have been married for a few years to my husband, Thomas. My husband was working at a pretty major company, and after a few years, he held a director role there. Before I got married, I was also working a lot and had a pretty successful career. When I was going to get married, I had a serious conversation with my husband about whether I was going to continue working or just marry into his family. When we had the conversation, my husband replied that he wanted to create a warm household, and that when he came home from work from a long day, he wanted me to welcome him home, so I became a full-time housewife. If I kept working, then we would have had more income, but if I just married into the family, then I could take care of my husband better. I was genuinely happy with either option, and so I decided to go along with my husband's wishes. Well, I thought that if things were to become financially difficult for us, then I could always go back to work if needed. But then, as soon as I became a full-time housewife, my mother-in-law who lived in the neighborhood became quite the painful person, and my husband and I were both troubled by her. In Thomas's family home, his father used to be living there with his mother, but then his father had an affair with a mistress in a different town, and he left his mother there alone. From there, Thomas's mother's affection towards Thomas exploded. For example, suddenly she would come over and barge into our house, and even though I'd be cooking in the kitchen, she would raise her voice and say,
Hey, what are you making there?
"What? I'm just getting dinner prepared, but..."
What even is this? It looks terrible. This cooking is no good. That's not suitable for my son's mouth. I know that my son likes the food that I cook way better anyway, so you need to feed him this.
As she said that, she slammed a large pot on the kitchen counter that she had brought over from her house. When that happened, I tried to explain to my mother-in-law that I was already cooking a healthy meal for Thomas. But every single time I tried to explain that to her, she would go into hysterics.
If Thomas eats your cooking, he's going to become sick. That boy should be eating my cooking and my cooking only. So you just need to be serving my food to my son, do you understand? From now on, I'm going to be cooking all of Thomas's meals, so you don't need to get in the way anymore. Back off.
She was yelling at me at this point. Right at that time, Thomas came home from work.
Oh dear, welcome home. Thomas, here you go. Your mom made all of this food for you, so make sure you eat to your heart's content, okay? I'm going to come back tomorrow with dinner for you again, so I hope you're excited.
She would say nonchalantly. When my husband heard that, he replied,
How many times do I have to tell you? Sarah is making me delicious meals already every day. You really don't need to bring this much over.
He tries to defend me, but it only goes in one ear and out the other with his mother.
That's not okay. I am going to be cooking your food and bringing it over for you.
She would insist on that and then leave the house. Of course, it wasn't every single day, but it was a frequent enough occurrence that the stress was piling up inside of me. Then one day, as usual, my mother-in-law brought over a full pot of food over to the house for Thomas. A couple of days later, she came to check how much of it was left. When she saw how much of it was left in the Tupperware, she was furious.
What is this? Thomas hasn't eaten any of it. I bet this is your doing. You're just not letting him eat it, are you?
And she was yelling at me in my kitchen. I did put it out for him to eat. However, there were other dishes prepared already, so I gave it to him like a side dish. My mother-in-law, for some reason, would always only bring over one dish. If it was a stew, she would bring over an entire pot full of stew. Or if it was rice, and she would bring over an entire pot full of that rice. Even if it was potato salad, the same way, she would bring an entire pot of potato salad. And there was no way that we would be able to finish all of that in one meal. However, none of the dishes that she brought were exactly main dishes for a meal. Of course, I was already cooking as well, and even if I was putting out my mother-in-law's cooking as a side dish, we would still be left over with too much. If anything, we were stuck left with so much of the same dish, and yet it'd be too rude to throw it away, so I was storing it in the freezer. But even then, we were still left with multiple Tupperware of the same food. However, my mother-in-law would be livid that we hadn't finished the entire pot that she had brought over.
I told you already that you don't need to feed him any of your cooking.
And then she would go into my fridge and started taking out all the leftovers from my cooking that I had stored or the food that I had prepped and threw it into the sink. She was just dumping them into the sink, and that made me snap. Please, that's enough already! Don't you think it's a waste to be throwing away food like this?
Shut up! Because you stole my son from me, even though Thomas is mine.
That was her response, so then I said with a serious face, "Sure, then you can have him back." When I said that, my mother-in-law froze on the spot. She was already in hysterics.
First of all, the only reason why my son stopped coming over to my house is because he got married to you.
Well then, why don't you ask Thomas yourself? I've never once told him not to go back home to his family's house. So please, go ahead, ask Thomas how he feels yourself. When I said that, I managed to push her out of the house for the time being. And then, that evening, my husband and I went over to his parents' house. As soon as we walked in, Thomas was the first to speak.
I'm already an independent adult, so leave me alone. That's enough. And stop bringing over so much food at once like that. Obviously, there's no way we would be able to finish it. Then on top of that, I heard that you threw away my wife's cooking. What the hell is that? You don't need to come over anymore. And don't bring any of your cooking either.
Straight off, he started to lecture his mother. I was already feeling really stressed out about this, but it seemed that my husband was pretty furious about it himself, that it even shocked me. For a moment, I did feel a little bit bad for her, and when I looked over at his mother, she was shrinking in her chair. Well, you don't need to yell at her all of a sudden. I'm sure it's hard for your mother to be yelled at by her son. So come on, you can be a little bit nicer, right? As soon as I tried to defend her, my mother-in-law exploded.
This is all your fault. You brainwashed him and you made him say all those things. This isn't my real son. I know that my real son is a lot nicer to me. He loves me.
When he said that, I was at loss for words. My husband said that this conversation wasn't going anywhere, and he walked out and went straight back into the car. I also realized that any further discussions was pointless, so we went straight home. After that, my mother-in-law was only messaging Thomas, and so I was free of her harassment. However,
are you sure you're eating properly? Have you caught a cold? That woman doesn't know what she's doing. That's why I'm worried to leave you with her. Please go back to the old you, Thomas. With love from your mom who thinks the world of you.
Even during work hours, apparently she was sending all these messages, and Thomas was ignoring them. However, perhaps she thought that him ignoring her messages was also because of me, and she came back to my house and started yelling in front of the door.
You don't have any right to get in between me and my son. Hurry up and get out of this house so that Thomas can go back to his real self.
She was screaming, but I wanted to tell her that she's the one that needed to come back to reality. Even after Thomas yelled at her like that in her own house, she still didn't seem to understand. It almost made me respect how much she had created this alternate reality in her mind. She continued to yell outside, and because I didn't want to disturb the neighbors, I called the police on her. Not long after that, she was taken away in the police car. Thanks to that, it seemed that the incident made all of the neighbors think that something was wrong with my mother-in-law, and they started to come and check on me.
Your mother-in-law, she seems like a handful. Are you being harassed by her? It must be difficult that your husband is a grown adult already and she can't let him go.
And they started to comfort me. I got right on board with that and responded, yes. To tell you the truth, it's been really troubling me. Ever since my father-in-law left her, she suddenly became obsessed with Thomas again. My husband and I are really confused by her actions. I put on a sad face, and well, I was able to get sympathy from everybody. After she was taken away in the police car, apparently my mother-in-law was told by the police that if she was going to continue acting like this, eventually, she wouldn't be able to get away with just a warning, and she would actually be arrested and have to go to prison. That seemed to work because she didn't come near our house again after that. However, because we had both already blocked her, there was no way for her to contact us either. Of course, there was no way that Thomas nor I would go over to his mother's house unless absolutely necessary. And then there were talks at Thomas's company that he might be placed in charge of a new department in a different city. So we were planning on continuing to ignore her and then disappearing from the town without saying a word. While I feel sad for her that her own husband left her, that doesn't make it acceptable for her to treat her son like a romantic partner. It was really terrifying. When I thought that about what would happen if we had a child and that child looked like my husband, it sent chills down my spine. That's because I knew that while Thomas was ignoring her, she would definitely tell us to hand over the baby to her and start making comments about me as a mother. Both Thomas and I want to have kids eventually, but we also knew that once we have children, we wouldn't be able to go on dates together much, and even if we were to go on vacations, they would all be centered around the baby. So when we got married, we had decided together that for the first 3 years, we would spend that time just the two of us. And that's why during those first 3 years, we've been on vacation all kinds of places and made a lot of memories together. Recently, we were starting to discuss that maybe it might be time that we start trying for a baby. We said that we wanted to grow our family, and we were finally starting to seriously try to get pregnant. That was when Thomas's mother suddenly became obsessive with Thomas, and it was so unexpected that it scared us both. But now that we were both about to move to a different city and my mother-in-law wasn't going to be around, I had a feeling it was going to become a great fresh start for our family. I was sad to leave this town that I'd gotten accustomed to, but I'm much happier knowing that we won't be tied down by Thomas's mother's obsession with him anymore. My name is Kayla. I live with my husband Kevin, who is a salaryman, our daughter who is in elementary school, and Kevin's parents. We live at his family home as a happy family of 5. Kevin's family was quite famous in his hometown for having many properties, and they own land all throughout the land. There were also quite a few properties under my husband's name, but because he was working at a company that had many transfers frequently, we were thinking about putting them up for sale eventually. As a full-time housewife, I had a lot of friends who were fellow moms from my daughter's elementary school. But there was one particular mom who was always acting selfishly, and we were all being troubled by her. I was especially having difficulty with her. That mom was named Jessica, and she lived nearby in my neighborhood. For quite some time now, she'd been parking her car around on our private property without our permission, and we were really troubled by it. Even though I tried to tell her many times to please not park without permission on our property, she would always try to turn it back on me. Every time, she would snap at me and say, "We're both fellow moms and friends, so you can at least let me just park my car here. Don't be so cheap." She would get frustrated with me and never even try to park her car elsewhere. One day, I saw Jessica park her car illegally on a plot of land that was under my husband's name, so I decided to go and scold her on the spot. "Hey, Jessica, I see you. Please don't park your car here without permission."
"It's not like you're using this property anyway, so what's the problem? Why are you always so cheap?"
"That's not the point, Jessica. Why can't you park your car on your own property by your house?"
"Why are you being so mean and selfish? If you're gonna be so insistent that I can't park here, I'm gonna tell all the fellow moms that you're being a cheap, bad friend."
After that, Jessica did exactly that. She started telling all the fellow moms that I was a cheap person, and that just because I'm rich, I was getting carried away and thought I was better than everybody, and spoke poorly of me to everybody. Because of that, I was isolated from the rest of the moms and became lonely. Not long after that, my husband came home from work one day and told me that he was being transferred to another city for work. I was just starting to be troubled by my relationship with the other moms in town, so I thought it was perfect timing. I immediately started to pack up our belongings. Our daughter said that she was sad to be leaving her friends in school, but because she was always had a social personality, the more I started to tell her about the new place that we were moving to, she became more and more positive about the move and seemed excited about making new friends. And so, as we were continuing to prepare for the move, my husband said that he was going to sell all of the property that was under his name. He wanted to finish everything before we moved out of town, so he rushed to sell it and was quick to find a buyer. He sold the land to a private company in his hometown, and that we were ready to move. However, when we were approaching a few days until the big move, on a sunny afternoon, Kevin suddenly got a phone call from a man named Mr. Thomas, from the company that he had sold his land to.
Hello, Kevin. I'm sorry to bother you, but there are about 20 cars that are parked illegally on the property that I recently purchased from you. Do you know what's going on here? Do you know anything about this? What? 20 cars? Nothing rings a bell, but I'll go and investigate immediately.
I had a bad feeling, and so my husband and I jumped into the car and went straight to the property in question. When we arrived, I looked around at all of the cars parked in the middle of the property. Amongst those 20 cars, I saw a familiar car. And that car was, without a doubt, Jessica's car. I picked up my phone and immediately called Jessica. "Jessica, can you please tell me exactly what's going on here? How can you park this many cars without any permission? This is taking it too far."
Oh my, did you notice? I'm hosting a Christmas party, and so I rented a nearby venue, and I'm borrowing your property as a parking lot for the day. There were more people attending than I expected, so it's a huge help to have your land.
You can't just do that without any permission. This isn't a parking lot.
What are you so mad about? Oh, I know. You must be upset that you weren't invited to the party, aren't you? As if anybody would invite someone as cheap and unfriendly as you to any party.
That doesn't matter, but please just hurry up and move the cars.
But the party just started here. Can't do that. You're getting in the way of my party now, so I'm going to hang up. Bye.
Even though I tried to ask her multiple times to move the cars, she refused to listen. And even though I was in the middle of talking to her, she hung up the phone. That was when a number of people from the company who purchased the land arrived on the scene.
The contractors are about to begin construction on the foundation of this land. So this is troublesome for us if we can't start construction.
I can imagine it is. I'm very sorry. Actually, please don't mind the cars. You're welcome to proceed as planned.
What? Are you sure we can do that? These cars won't be able to be moved for quite some time if we do. All these cars are parked here without permission anyway, so that's not our problem. Please, go ahead. Understood. Thank you.
As they began construction, the company brought their massive truck and parked it just in front of the street where all the other cars were parked. On top of that, they started digging a massive hole in the ground, and so the entry to the land where all the cars were parked was completely blocked. Until the construction was completed, it would be impossible to move any of the cars. Mr. Thomas reported the cars to the police. And right around the time the police arrived on the scene, Jessica's party must have ended because she arrived with a group of others to get their cars. As soon as they arrived, Jessica realized that they wouldn't be able to get their cars out, and she started shaking.
What is going on here? How are you supposed to get her cars out of this place?
As if to deliver the final blow, the police then handed her a ticket for illegal parking and informed her that she would have to pay a fine for every car. Jessica started to panic, and she tried to run away from the scene, but the police were right there.
Stop right there! There's no point in running! Stop!
How did this happen? I'm not going to pay any kind of fine. This isn't my fault.
This time, all the people who went to the party turned to Jessica and they were furious. Jessica was desperate to try to calm down the people who were there. But of course, nobody wanted to listen to her excuses, because it was obvious that they wouldn't be able to get their cars out. Even though Jessica was told that they could park their cars there, they were all livid that this was how things ended up, and pointed their anger at Jessica. Jessica awkwardly tried to come up with excuses.
Everybody, please calm down. Please listen to me. This is where I always park my car. That's why I thought it'd be fine. I never imagined that things would turn out this way.
I warned you many times over and over again not to park your car here without permission, didn't I? And this time as well. It's not like you informed us in advance or got any permission before you parked the cars here, isn't that right?
Well, that's...
In the end, all the people who parked their cars there were unable to get to their cars because of Jessica. And because they all blamed her for it, Jessica was left to pay the fine for all 20 cars herself. The fine was $200 per car, and because there were 20 cars parked there, was stuck having to pay the huge fine of $4,000 by herself.
By the way, when is this construction going to be finished? I want to hurry up and get my car back.
The construction's gonna take at least 1 week, so you won't be able to take your cars out until then.
1 week? I can't use my car for that long. That's going to be a problem, so please hurry up and do something about it.
You're the one that parked here without any permission, aren't you? There's nothing that can be done until the construction's over, so please, give up already!
No way! All I did was park my car here for a couple of hours. This is too awful.
But nobody said that you could park your car, so this is your own fault!
But first of all, who are you anyway? I want to talk to the owner of this land, Kayla, so you shut up and move.
Excuse me, but I am the owner of this land here.
Huh?
As soon as they heard that, all the other guests became even more furious with Jessica, who didn't even know who the property belonged to. They said that it was a given that Jessica would have to take responsibility for the time that they wouldn't be able to use their cars, and they started saying that she needs to make clear how she's going to handle it from the next day. In the end, everybody was left with no choice but to rent a car for the week until the construction was finished. And of course, Jessica was going to have to pay for everybody's rental car fees. Of course, there was no way that Jessica would be able to pay that amount of money as a full-time housewife, and she was left with no option to tell her family everything that happened. When she told her husband, apparently he was so furious with her that he no longer had any feelings for her and he left the house. A few days later, we left the incident about the illegal parking to the police and to the current landowner, and my family and I went back to living our normal lives to get ready for the move. But then suddenly, Jessica came and barged into our house.
Kayla, I know you're in there. open up right now.
Jessica, what's the matter? Why are you raising your voice like that? You're going to trouble the neighbors, so please stop.
What the hell is going on? That land over there is your property, isn't it? I can't believe you called the police for illegal parking when we're both fellow moms. Give me back my money.
We already sold all that land, so it's none of our business anymore.
What do you mean you sold the land?
That property over there already belongs to this business. And for anybody to park illegally, there would, of course, be reported to the police, wouldn't it? That's their private property, and they're welcome to do as they wish. When I told Jessica, she no longer was able to say anything back, and she sulked as she dragged her feet back. After that, I heard a rumor that she was crying to everybody that her husband wouldn't come home. But because of the incident with the party and the police, none of the other moms wanted to be her friend anymore either. Jessica no longer had anybody around her, and even after that, nobody wanted anything to do with her, and so she was left to live her life in loneliness. As for us, after that we were able to successfully move into our new town. We moved out of my husband's family home and we began our lives on a new property. I was worried about all kinds of things to be starting a new life in an unknown place, but when I thought about the trouble that I had with Jessica back in her hometown, I knew that we would be able to live a much more peaceful life here. From now on, I'm going to be a lot more cautious about my friendship with fellow moms, and I hope that I can meet people that I share the same values with. My name is Sarah. I live with my husband Michael and our son Thomas, who's in preschool right now. I married Michael after 2 years of dating him, and at the time I didn't realize it when we were only dating, but I found out after we got married that he had quite the Oedipus complex and was a total mama's boy. Michael always wanted to go back to his parents' house, so from time to time our family goes over to visit his parents. But to be honest, I was pretty troubled by my relationship with my mother-in-law. Even if I'm trying to flatter her, I can't say that my mother-in-law was good at cooking, but she loves cooking and she would always cook a homemade meal for us. However, it always tasted horrible, and my husband would always come up with some kind of excuse not to eat it. And so, it became the norm for me to be the only one that was forced to eat these terrible food. I simply didn't want to anger my mother-in-law, so I would force myself to eat it, but because she used all kinds of random ingredients in the food, I would often get a stomachache after. Because my son was still young, even if he didn't eat it, he wasn't particularly yelled at for it, and so we just pretended like he was a picky eater so that we could avoid having him eat this mystery food. One day when we went over to Michael's family's house, his mother wasn't home. Because of that, I was going to be making lunch for the day, and my husband and my son requested that I make ramen. Ramen was actually my mother-in-law's specialty dish, and she would often make the broth out of fish and spend hours on her ramen. The ramen that I made was a very simple and classic style ramen, and everyone said it was delicious and licked their bowls clean. That was when my father-in-law said,
You can't even compare this to my wife's tasteless ramen.
But right at that time, my mother-in-law had just come home and walked into the living room.
I can't believe you would speak about me like that when I'm not here. That's awful.
And she was furious, and they started to get into a fight. Ma'am, please calm down. It's okay.
You shut up! First of all, this is all your fault for making ramen in the first place. I can't believe you would let your family eat the same thing as instant noodles. Your failure as a wife.
Now that I think about it, I always thought that Sarah's cooking tasted kind of like instant food.
What? Instead of trying to calm down his mother who was yelling at me, instead my husband took her side and came after me, and that was infuriating. I felt really bad that I angered my mother-in-law, and when we got home, I was feeling really upset about it. But that was when my husband said the most unbelievable thing.
Hey, what do you think that my mom is?
What do you mean?
It might be true that my mom's cooking is tasteless, but I can't believe you made ramen in her house. Almost like you did it on purpose.
I only made ramen because you and Thomas insisted that's what you wanted to eat for lunch.
I don't remember that, but I've been thinking this for a while now. But if you don't act like my mom's cooking is delicious, then I feel so bad for her. You better be careful from the next time.
Even though he would always run away from cooking and only force me to eat his own mother's tasteless cooking, I couldn't believe that he was even complaining to me about it. I was irritated, and I was about to reach the peak of my patience that I'd been holding in until then. A few days later, I got a call from my mother-in-law saying that she received vegetables from a friend and that she wanted to share some with us. So Michael, Thomas, and I headed over to their house on the weekend. When we arrived, Michael's mother was waiting for us with a snarky look on her face and 3 bowls of ramen prepared. I saw Michael try to run away, but I grabbed his arm, and that day my husband was going to be eating his mother's food with me for the first time in a long time. On the dining room table, there were 2 large bowls of ramen for Michael and me, and for Thomas there was a child-sized bowl as well as small rice balls and sausages for him. Even though I angered her the last time that we were there, she still prepared food for us that I know must have taken her hours to make. With my mother-in-law's kindness right in front of me, for some reason, I started to feel some kind of guilt towards her. My husband seemed terrified to eat his ramen, and after taking just 1 bite out of it, he got up out of his seat without saying a word and disappeared from the dining room. Even though the ramen was tasteless and terrible, I said over and over again that it was delicious and forced myself to finish it. Perhaps because I was forcing myself and trying to say that it was good, the ramen tasted even worse than ever. Even though the ramen was usually fishy and barely had any flavor, the ramen today seemed like it had a bitterness in it.
Oh dear, you still have some soup left. You need to drink all of it.
I'm sorry, I'm very full, so...
You're the worst kind of leftovers. Somebody made a cooked meal for you. Are you seriously going to waste this cooking that took me hours to make? Shut your mouth and finish all of it.
As she said that, my mother-in-law tried to force me to have the remainder of the ramen soup. Just thinking about drinking the rest of this tasteless soup, I started to get nauseous, and I couldn't help but to look away from my bowl of ramen. But then, when I wasn't looking away, Thomas had reached for my bowl and was about to drink it for me. However, right at that moment, my mother-in-law screamed, "No!" Even though she always tries to get Thomas to eat her food, I thought it was strange that she would try to stop him. After that moment, I felt something shift in my body. I was suddenly overwhelmed with stomach pain. I thought that something was wrong with me when I heard my husband yell from the kitchen.
Hey, Mom! Where's your first aid kit? Ah, there it is. There it is. I have a really bad headache, so I'm gonna have some painkillers.
You can't take that medicine.
Even though my mother-in-law tried to stop him by yelling to the kitchen, it was in vain because my husband had already drank the mystery medicine. And then I could see that Michael was starting to experience extreme stomach pain like me.
My stomach! Is this because of this medicine?
Just hurry up and get to the toilet now.
I thought it was suspicious, and when I tried to confront my mother-in-law about it, she insisted that she didn't know anything at all, and so I grabbed the medicine that my husband had just drank. My mother-in-law panicked and she tried to snatch it out of my hands, but I managed to at least get the name of the medicine, and I looked it up on my phone. And that medicine was laxatives. Did you mix laxatives into my ramen? No matter how you think about it, that's too awful!
Because you refuse to enjoy my cooking.
My mother-in-law turned and was angry at me, and as we got into an argument, my father-in-law, who had been out for the afternoon, came home right at that moment, and so I explained the entire situation to him. And then he was furious, and he kicked his wife out of the house on the spot. In the meantime, because of the large amount of laxatives that was mixed into the ramen, I had stomach pains that lasted until the next day. Despite that, my husband was only worried about the fight between his parents, and he didn't even seem the slightest bit worried about my health or well-being. And that was when I started to think seriously about getting a divorce from Michael. After that, because I was so traumatized from the pain I felt from eating ramen with laxatives mixed into it, I stopped going to Michael's house with him, and I was estranged from my mother-in-law. It seemed that my father-in-law was troubled for many years by his wife's terrible cooking, and perhaps because he was finally freed from that stress, he must have been really happy. Because he used to be extremely skinny, but it looks like he was finally putting on some weight. In the end, he decided to get a divorce from his wife. A few days after that, I got a phone call from my mother-in-law, and she tried to apologize to me. And then she tried to ask me to help her convince her husband not to get a divorce. But I could understand very well just how much my father-in-law had been suffering until now. I told her that there was no way I could trust somebody like her that would secretly put laxative into my food like that, and so I refused. Because my husband was such a mama's boy, I already predicted that he would become furious if he found out that I went against his mother's wishes. However, I couldn't not tell him what happened, so when he came from work that day, I explained the situation. I told him exactly how the phone call went, and just as I expected, Michael threw a tantrum.
You married into this family, and yet you're going to deny a flavor that my mom asked you? What the hell are you thinking? Help her and make my parents get back together. If my parents actually get divorced, then it's gonna be all your fault. And if that happens, then I'm going to be divorcing you!
As soon as I heard his words, I felt something step inside of me, and I exploded and unloaded everything onto him. Is that so? Well then, let's get a divorce. Not only was I forced to eat such tasteless cooking, as a cherry on top, she mixed laxatives into my food without me knowing. You know it's a crime to put laxative into somebody's foods without their knowledge. You know that, right?
Stop treating my mom like she's a criminal!
I'm definitely not going to be the one again between your parents. Let's get a divorce.
Obviously, there's no way you could actually do that. If you're going to apologize, now's your chance.
I already decided that we're going to get a divorce. I've had enough of a mama's boy like you. When my husband realized that I was being serious about my intention of getting divorced, he immediately started to panic. However, I had already decided and it was set in stone. Michael knew more than anybody how much I suffered from the laxatives, yet he was taking his mother's side. And not only that, but he was attacking me, and I didn't need a husband like that anymore. On the next day, I had already prepared divorce papers and actually put them in front of him. And Michael apologized to me multiple times. However, I didn't accept any of them. And then, I told him that I was thinking about suing his mother for assault. I checked with the lawyer, and putting laxative into somebody's food without their knowledge and forcing them to eat it is a form of assault. And so, I decided to sue your mom for it.
You're joking, right? Stop that! My mom already apologized and said that she feels bad about it, so let it go!
Do you have any idea how much pain I was in for days?
No way!
My husband tried to get out of the divorce until the very end, but eventually he realized that I wasn't going to budge, and the divorce went through. After that, because he told me just how regretful his mother was, I did think twice about suing her. In return for not pressing charges, I made Michael promise that he would never come near me or Thomas ever again. However, he refused to pay child support fees, so in the end I had to hire a lawyer to go through with the divorce, and I was finally able to get his legal agreement to pay child support fees every month. Perhaps after my son and I moved out of the house, he became lonely, and he came to me over and over again, crying and apologizing. But of course I had no intention of getting back together with him. I gave him permission to see Thomas once a month, and that was it. As for my former mother-in-law, I heard that she also tried everything that she could to get out of her divorce. But in the end, she wasn't able to convince her husband not to leave, and they did get divorced. She had to move into a small apartment by herself and live alone. Michael then turned the blame for his own divorce on his mother, and because he resented her for it, they became estranged. My mother-in-law had nobody left on her side and was going to be stuck living the rest of her elderly life alone. My name is Marina. I'm a full-time housewife living together with my husband and our son in kindergarten. 3 years ago, both my parents went to heaven because of an illness, so I inherited the mountain that my father owned. That is why on weekends I go to the mountains to forage mushrooms with my family. There are different kinds of mushrooms in the mountain. There are even rare types of mushrooms like the matsutake mushrooms, which are known for their thick, fibrous white flesh and their earthy, spicy flavor and aroma. I was looking forward to the weekends because it meant that I got to bond with my family while we gathered my favorite matsutake mushrooms. When my parents were still living on this earth, we used to go foraging for mushrooms in the mountains together with them. When we arrived home with the matsutake mushrooms, my mother used to cook palatable dishes using the mushrooms we picked. That is why I hold that mountain close to my heart, because it is a place filled with precious memories with my family.
We gathered so many matsutake mushrooms today! You're right, Shane. That's a lot of matsutake mushrooms. The weather is great today, so how about we grill some and enjoy it outside? Yippee!
We decided to cook the mushrooms and eat them outside, so I prepared the grill and started cooking the matsutake mushrooms. Then, while we were waiting for the mushrooms to be cooked, our neighbor Nancy passed by our house.
Oh my, that smells so good. Are those matsutake mushrooms?
Hi Nancy, we're grilling matsutake mushrooms outside because the weather is great today. Would you like to have some?
I just ate, so my stomach is full right now. Thanks for asking, but I'll pass for now. Those matsutake mushrooms look great, though. They're expensive, aren't they? Where did you buy them?
My family and I foraged these matsutake mushrooms from the mountain.
Is that so? You foraged them from the mountains? I want to go pick matsutake mushrooms, too. Which mountain did you find them?
Nancy asked me about the location of the mountain, but my father told me not to tell him where the mountain is located, because there are people who go to the mountain only to forage matsutake mushrooms. That is why I didn't tell Nancy where the mountain is. But Nancy was displeased and turned sour. However, I can't break the promise that I made to my beloved father. So I froze there, thinking long and hard about how to say it. Before I could respond, Nancy stomped her feet and walked away. Nancy is known among our fried group for her gluttonous appetite. Whenever we go out to eat with the other mothers, Nancy always says this to everyone.
Can I have a bite? Just a bite.
She says just a bite, but she sometimes ends up eating the whole thing. Nancy acts like whoever food is around, so I didn't really like her that much. I was a bit worried that Nancy might hold a grudge against me for not telling her where the mountain with matsutake mushrooms is located. That is why whenever I see her at the kindergarten, I was afraid to talk to her because she might ask me about the mushrooms again. Nancy not only has a gluttonous appetite, but she is also strong-willed. When I thought that Nancy might take her revenge on me, I trembled out of fear, so I wasn't in the mood. Little did I know that the hunch was about to come true. A few days later, then one night, when everyone was asleep in their beds, I awoke in the middle of the night to the loud noises coming from the garage. I was scared of what was happening in the garage, so I decided to wake my husband up. "Mark, wake up. I hear noises coming from the garage."
You're right.
My husband and I slowly climbed down the stairs, tiptoeing so as not to make a sound. We then saw a silhouette in the garage when there was supposed to be no one inside there. So my husband called the police right away, whispering the details to the police so the culprit won't hear us. We waited in the dark for the police officers to come. They finally came and seized the intruder in the garage. I was completely shocked when I saw the face of the culprit. To my utter surprise, the person in the garage was Nancy. I was at a loss for words, but I somehow was able to compose myself, so I asked her what she was doing in the garage and why. Nancy confessed her motives for sneaking into our garage in the middle of the night. According to her, she wanted to steal the SD card of the car's dashboard camera because she wanted to know the location of the mountain with matsutake mushrooms. The police took Nancy away in the police car, and after that, Nancy came to her house together with her husband to apologize for what she did.
I am truly sorry for the inconvenience caused by my wife.
I am sorry.
We were very shocked, because the police came to our house in the middle of the night. The neighbors were inconvenienced, so they kept on asking me a lot of questions. We still have to pay off the house loan, and our children are still very young. So if you could find it in your hearts to forgive us, we would be very grateful to you. If only you promised not to do the same thing again.
I will never do such a thing again. I am truly sorry. It was an impulse thought that I had.
All right, I understand. With that said, we will forgive you just this once. Thank you very much!
Nancy and her husband looked very apologetic, and thinking about their young children, Mark and I decided that we wouldn't submit a report of damage. However, when I looked at Nancy, she was sulking, so it made me wonder if we're okay with settling it like this. Our children are both in the same class in kindergarten, so I didn't want to say anything at school about what happened. Thankfully, Nancy talked to me in kindergarten like nothing happened. However, when we went out to eat, I didn't see Nancy regretting what she did, and her gluttonous appetite never changed. But then one day, when we were having a lunch meeting with the other mothers, Nancy started talking about the mountain with matsutake mushroom.
Did you guys know? Marina family went to forage mushrooms in the mountains.
Matsutake mushrooms? Wow, really? That's amazing.
I know, right? But she wants it all to herself, so she doesn't want to share with me, so she won't tell me where the mountain is located. She really is very stingy.
Nancy, what are you saying? It's not like I want it all to myself.
If what you're saying is true, then why don't you at least tell me the location? Come on, hurry up and tell us where it is. Let's go there with everyone in this group.
Well, now, Nancy, there's no need to force Marina to tell us, There are times when you just want to spend time together with your family, right?
Right. I thought of telling Nancy that the mountain is private property, but if I tell her that, I have a feeling that she'll ask me to take her there all the more. That is why I decided to shut my mouth and not talk about it. Nancy got the police force involved in the situation, and she even branded me as a villain of the group in this incident. So to Nancy, who kept on pestering me about the location of the mountain, I had a strong resentment towards her. Thinking that her regret was fake, I regretted not filing a report of damage to the police. The next weekend, I went to the mountain with my family, and we had plenty of fun foraging matsutake mushrooms to my heart's content. Then, while I was preparing dinner for my family after we arrived home, I received a call from Nancy. Hello?
Marina, hello? What is this place? This is paradise. I can pick all the matsutake mushrooms I want.
Huh? What do you mean? Wait, what? Where are you right now, Nancy?
When I followed your car, I arrived at this mountain filled with matsutake mushrooms. This is what I should have done in the first place. I'm so lucky to be able to come to this mountain.
Unbelievable! Nancy followed her car and tracked the location of the mountain. I was very dismayed by Nancy's appetite, so I couldn't accept her apology anymore. I decided that I would make her regret and properly reflect on her actions this time. I'm sorry for your loss.
Huh? What do you mean?
That mountain is private property. It's my family's private property. Please don't trespass without permission.
It's too late for you to tell me that, you know, because I already filled my bag with matsutake mushrooms. I won't share a single piece of mushroom with you.
Is that so? I understand. After hanging up the phone, I immediately reported Nancy to the police. Not long after, Nancy was taken to the police station by the officers, and I demanded that she give back all the matsutake mushrooms that she stole. During the police interrogation, Nancy said,
I regret what I did. I will reflect on this and I will never do it again.
That's what Nancy told the police officers. But of course, there was no way we believed her this time around. So my anger and my husband's anger reached their peaks. After that, Nancy came to our house again together with her husband. Nancy apologized again like she did before. However, there was no way my husband and I could forgive her this time around. So when I told Nancy that I would submit a report of damage to the police, she started getting upset.
What? Why? This is unbelievable! How could you sue a fellow kindergarten mother? I thought we were friends! Our children are good friends, so at least let this pass, you stingy woman!
Hey, what are you saying?
Because...
Hearing what Nancy really thinks about us, my husband and I filed a damage report without hesitation. Nancy ended up having to pay a fine for theft, so she kept on calling me, pestering me to withdraw the damage report. Nancy was too persistent, so my husband contacted Nancy's husband. Her husband then apologized profusely to my husband and then scolded Nancy. Since then, I stopped receiving calls from Nancy. Nancy's husband had enough of her shenanigans, so they ended up getting a divorce because of this incident. Her husband took custody of their child, so Nancy had to leave their house. Nancy then disappeared from the neighborhood, and she ended up living alone in a small, dingy apartment. Rumors say that her parents were furious when they found out about the incident of their daughter spending time at the police station. Nancy had nowhere to go, so she desperately searched for a job. However, the only work experience she had under her belt was as a housewife, so she couldn't find a job and ended up living in poverty. After some time later, on my husband's way home from drinking with his colleagues, he saw Nancy sitting a customer off in front of a mature woman's pub. According to him, she looked thinner and paler. He can tell that she is working very hard to make ends meet. There were rumors going around about Nancy's incident, so I grabbed that opportunity to tell them that the mountain was private property, and I also told them the reason why I couldn't tell them where it was located. Surprisingly, everyone understood me. Nancy with a gluttonous appetite is no longer around, so whenever my family and I gather plenty of matsutake mushrooms, I invited the other mothers and their children in kindergarten who are Shane's friends. Because of that, I now have one more thing to look forward to in my life. I feel relief right now thinking that I can connect and have fun with my close friends. My husband was born and raised in the West by his farmer parents, and I was born and raised in the eastern part of the country. As for our engagement ceremony, it was held here in the East. My husband's university is in the metropolis, so we held our wedding ceremony near that university. My work only allows me 3 days off from work during New Year's and another 3 days for Thanksgiving. I haven't been to my husband's parents' house yet because it hasn't been long since we got married. Then, in July of that year, my grandfather-in-law passed away. It was my first time going to my husband's parents' house, so I brought an apron with me because I was told it is a common tradition in their family to do so for women when they meet their parents-in-law for the first time in their house. Apparently, it's to show that one is prepared to fulfill their role as a wife, such as doing the chores at home. Then, the moment we arrived at their house, my mother-in-law stepped out of the front door and stood there with a smug look on her face.
Oh, what's with that outfit? You're dressing like a guest when you're not. You didn't even bring an apron. I prepared one for you because I know you wouldn't bring one.
She grimaced and uttered those words, so I took out the apron that I brought from my bag, to which she grumpily responded,
Huh? Did you bring an apron? Is that so?
I knew right then and there that she was trying to one-up me to assert dominance over me. I was a bit irritated by her behavior, but I held it in knowing that I didn't have to come back to this place unless I have to attend another funeral. So I decided to pretend to listen to her and obeyed her. The moment I stepped into their house, she made me work like a slave, ordering me to do this and that. However, when I make a single mistake, my mother-in-law grabs that chance to scold me, saying,
Just as I thought, spoiled daughters born and raised in the city don't know a thing.
She called me spoiled and other rude names and made fun of me. What's even worse is that whenever my husband is not in the vicinity, my mother-in-law says mean things in a sarcastic tone. So my irritation meter kept going up. But since I'm here to hell with a funeral and to pay respect to my father-in-law, I controlled my feelings by telling myself to hold it in. Whenever my husband is around, my mother-in-law acts very nonchalantly like an ordinary mother, but she makes my husband run errands outside so she can have a one-on-one time with me. Then, the moment my husband is out of the room, she complained bitterly, so it was very depressing. Then, the long-awaited final day arrived. Thinking that there was no way I would come back to this house ever again, I tried to leave the place before the drinking party, because I finished fulfilling my duties. However, my mother-in-law saw me and stopped me from leaving.
Where do you think you're going? At least join us for a drink with the relatives and make your face known to the family. You married into this family after all.
My mother-in-law said those words and grimaced. So I thought that, well, since my last day here, I guess I should at least have a drink with everyone and get to know them a little. My mother-in-law might not have the best attitude in the world, but I should give my husband's relatives the benefit of the doubt. However, when I went around and tried to pour them a drink, they all ignored me like I was a ghost invisible to them. It was before everyone raised their glasses for a toast, so the glasses were resting upside down on the table. They ignored me even though I asked them if they needed their glasses filled. They looked away and didn't even bother to hand me their empty glasses. After asking the first two people and getting rejected, I thought that they probably just don't drink alcohol, or that they probably just are so absorbed in their conversations, but almost all of them ignored me and some even rolled their eyes at me. What's even worse is that they did it deliberately. They grinned as if trying to suppress a laugh. There was a very uncomfortable silence throughout. I wasn't given a cushion to sit on from the start. I was certain that my mother-in-law had something to do with this. Since it was the last day, my husband wasn't in the house with us because he went out to buy souvenirs for his colleagues and mine. I was so pissed off with everyone's behavior, so I went to the front door and took out my shoes from the shoe closet. Then I did the most shocking thing I ever did in my life. I climbed onto the table and stomped my feet with my shoes on. I couldn't control myself anymore out of rage, so I kicked the food out of the table like it wasn't uncommon to do. At first, everyone was dumbfounded when they saw me stomping and kicking, not registering in their raisin-sized brains what was happening in front of them. But the moment they realized what was happening, my mother-in-law and father-in-law stopped me and hurled me out of the house. Then other relatives, the uncle, together with my mother-in-law and father-in-law started preaching to me, but I ignored them all and called my father instead. My husband, parents, and relatives did this and that to me, I told my dad. I sure am glad that I was raised in the city. I am so shocked that my husband's relatives are all rude and lack humanity, I complained to my dad. I then walked out of the house and stood by the fence, where I called my friend on the phone and loudly told her every rude thing my husband's relatives did to me. Then the neighbors seemed to have heard my loud voice because they came out of their house to see what was going on. That is why I took that chance to tell them, is this normal behavior in this town? The whole extended family pesters the wife. This is outrageous. I'm so shocked, I announced to the whole neighborhood. To my surprise, there were many people who like gossip who are also friendly people, and they were on my side.
How could they do that? One must be exhausted from the long travel.
You go, girl. Make them regret what they did to you. Your mother-in-law is such an idiot.
Your parents-in-law's family is insane. 18 years ago, they didn't even contribute any monetary amount to the town's annual festival, they all told me. I probably looked like I gossiped, so they let me join their group. I was able to fit in right away because I had plenty of stress I needed to relieve. After a few hours, my husband finally arrived home. So I reported everything that his parents and relatives did to me and how they treated me very rudely. After hearing me speak, my husband was enraged by what happened.
What in the world were you thinking? Just because Kimberly married me and she's a part of the family now, doesn't mean you can say and do whatever you want to. She came all the way here to help with Grandpa's funeral. Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for group bullying a single person?
My husband was furious and scolded them. The room was still a mess because whereby the food and alcohol I kicked earlier were cluttered all over the floor. The oldest man in the group shouted to get it cleaned, but I got even with them by ignoring him like he ignored me earlier, and then I focused on my phone instead. I know that what I did was a bit too much, but how did they expect me to react when they bullied me like I was a nobody? Their hearts are rotten because who in their right mind would do such a thing? The other relatives were looking at each other, trying to suppress their laughter because my husband was angry. So I told my husband, you don't have to get angry, Marvin. I already let the whole neighborhood know about what they did to me, and I already told my parents about this, so I feel a bit better now. Upon hearing that, my parents-in-law gave me a smug look. When I went back into the house to get my things, the neighbors who I talked to earlier came with me and told my parents-in-law,
Parents don't give their son's wife a tough time like that now. I'm warning you, you better stop doing that. Young people nowadays are quite strong after all.
That's what she said on their face. Come to think of it, she's actually right. There must have been many wives who didn't talk back to their mother-in-law, so they just shut up and held it in. But modern wives now know how to defend themselves when they get bullied or abused. While I was waiting at the front door, my husband went inside the room and brought my things for me. Then before we left, he faced them and shouted,
You should be ashamed of yourselves!
He scolded them for me. When my husband seriously got mad this time, his relatives drooped their shoulders as if to show defeat. Seeing that unfold before their eyes, the neighbors laughed so hard. Even when we arrived home, my husband still couldn't contain his anger. He then told me that he would cut ties with his parents so we don't need to go back to that hellish place anymore. Of course, I don't have to deal with his pesky realities as well. However, since there is not much money to be made with the farm, my husband used to send money to them when he got a bonus from work. But since he will cut ties with them, there's no need to send them money anymore. I heard him say all that on the phone call with his parents. My parents-in-law do not spend extravagantly, but I'm sure that the money that my husband sends to them once every half year is quite a huge help to them. Thinking that they're screwed if my husband cuts ties with them, my mother-in-law tried to apologize for her actions, but my husband replied,
Seriously? You've got to be kidding me! Am I a joke to you? I don't have the face to show Kimberly's parents now because of the shameless act you lot did to Kimberly. She went all the way to your house to help, but you, Dad, and our relatives all came together and bullied her! What has gotten into you? You are all insane!
I will apologize for that. Your wife is still young, so we just thought that she needs to learn proper etiquette and manners, so we taught her.
I wonder who needs to be taught manners and right conduct. I've never been so ashamed in my life with you as my parents. You're a disgrace to the family. You seem to not respect or care about Kimberly, so I will cut ties with you. That's it from me.
My husband then hung up the phone. I sure was offended by my parents-in-law and relatives-in-law, but I'm glad that my husband was on my side and understood the situation. We didn't hear from my parents-in-law for a while, but when the month when my husband gets paid a bonus arrived, my mother-in-law contacted him again and she begged him to continue sending them money again. My parents-in-law live in a very old house in the village, so it seems like it needs to be repaired now and then. My husband agreed to send the money for the repairs every half year, only after they did the house repairs and have the full amount. However, since my husband stopped sending money to them, so with only money earned from the farm, they couldn't afford to repair the parts of the house that needs fixing. That is why my parents-in-law were in tears and begged my husband to send them money for the repairs and some for their living expenses. My parents-in-law are already old, so it's not like they are able to plant many crops and livestock. So they probably thought that if my husband sent them money like he used to, they'll be able to afford the repair costs, and as long as they are modest with their expenses, they won't be burdened with financial problems. But since that money no longer exists, so they were very desperate for him to continue like before. However, my husband never imagined that his parents would bully me. He was very disappointed by them, so he never changed his mind. Of course, if that happened, no matter how well they know each other in the countryside, it becomes a problem when they don't pay since it's business. Because of that, they were in trouble, and the case has been taken to court. It's none of our business anymore, so I don't care about it. Apparently, my husband was loved and trusted by everyone in the town because of his personality and his intelligence. The rumors about that intelligent and trustworthy man's wife was bullied by his family has spread throughout the town. So the citizens of the town give them cold shoulders and stares whenever they see my parents-in-law. They got what they deserved.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.